Welcome to the latest edition of the CommonSpace show. I'm David Jamieson.
And I'm Rhiannon Davies, and we're joined today by Nathalia Urban, who is
Hello.
a Brazilian journalist.
But before we get on to events in Latin America, where it's all kicking off, in a much smaller and more boring way, it's also kicking off here in the UK. It finally looks like, there's been many false dawns, but it does finally look like there's going to be a general election. Are you excited to vote in the general election?
I'm not allowed to vote here.
This is interesting because this is actually one of the issues that's come up, although it's EU citizens that people are talking about. But it could be that the election the vote is extended to 16 and 17-year-olds and possibly also European Union citizens. Do you think that's a good thing? Do you think it's a necessary thing?
Well, of course. I mean, I miss having political rights. It's important,
Yeah.
you know. And I just don't understand why am I allowed to have, like, to pay taxes and have all the boring obligations of a citizen, but my opinion is not respected nor valued or even allowed to give an opinion. So I would love to be able to vote when I expressed my concern to my MP. She said, well, next year you'll be eligible to apply for British citizenship, but it's like super expensive, and who wants to be British right now?
It's weird because there's in a sense in which we've incorporated the ideas of the kind of European Union's selective border regime, because there will now be a debate, and I think there should be, about whether or not European citizens should be allowed to vote in a general election. But we've almost therefore accepted the idea that European citizens are a cut above people who've come from outside of Europe, which is a very, and we'll maybe get on to talk about this, is a very old kind of colonial view of the world.
And even when I have been talking with other non-EU citizens here, but I can vote because you are a Commonwealth citizen. I was colonized by the wrong people, so and I can vote in Portugal as well. So I'm just worse off.
Yeah.
But it's difficult because as someone that is very active in the political scenario here, I feel very left out when I get very upset when I see people register to vote and this kind of things. Like all my friends, like they are kind of is part of a club that I can be a member just because I was unfortunate enough to born in someone else.
But will you still be getting involved, do you think, if the elections happen in December? Are you still going to be out campaigning? Are you going to be...
Oh, no, of course.
Yeah.
I think that the way the things are moving forward in the world right now, we should all be campaigning and together for the global issues. As I said several times, what's happening here, what's happening in Brazil, what's happening in the United States, it's not a national matter, it's an international one. And if we do not stick together, the good guys do not stick together, they will win, because they are sticking together and they are winning. One of my main concerns with this election right now is to have someone in power that will change the asylum seekers policy, because people from Latin America are not allowed to claim asylum here in the UK. There is a list of countries that they consider for asylum, and Brazilians and people from Latin America in general are not allowed to
That'd be
claim
interesting to raise, actually, because I know that there is a list, but I don't really know what qualifies.
I know this because I'm friends with the people from Brazilian Solidarity, from Labour Party in England, and they've been talking about open up the opportunity. Because the people here that I know that are from Brazil, that are here as asylum claimers, asylum seekers, are victims of human traffic, are like women that were abused and things like that, but not like political asylum.
Yeah. And I wonder what it would take for Brazil to get on that list. I mean, how far does Bolsonaro have to go in order for it to be deemed a country with people
But the
at
thing
risk?
is, we are already at that point in Brazil. Like, we are having like a mass people are fleeing the country, like the intellectuals, the journalists, university professors that are big people in Brazil. They are famous in Brazil in the academic and the left side of the society. They are already fleeing the country. Like we have Jean Willis. I don't know if you heard about him.
I think so.
He was a Brazilian federal deputy, and he was receiving death threats and things like that, and he left Brazil, and now he was here in Europe. He never disclosed the country he was here, and now he's gonna be assistant professor in Harvard, I think. But we have other people that I know that I'm in contact with. They are living in Brazil over death threats and things like that. So we are already at that point.
Yeah.
So
and it won't be some small moment if after 10 years of austerity in Britain the Tories are kicked out. You know what I mean? For all the cynicism and all the frustration and irritation of British politics, it will mean something to that global picture if they are gone. At the RIC conference, we were asking people what the foreign policy orientation of people in Scotland should be. They are specifically independent supporters, but just people who live in a country like Scotland. And you were going around in Vox popping a few folk.
And here's what they had to say.
The people united will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated.
What kind of foreign policy should independent Scotland have?
It should have a foreign policy where it doesn't get itself involved in alliances that are going to take it to war, or going to have it in a situation where it's going to be supporting expeditionary wars by other stronger states.
Okay.
That's the key thing.
I'm an internationalist, not a nationalist, and I think that's a mistake that people make, that they think that when you want independence, it's a selfish thing. It's not. Obviously we think it would be better for Scotland, but we also think our relationship with other countries would flourish as well, because when everything goes through Westminster, for instance the Kurds, a lot of the direct help we want to give them, we have to go through the Foreign Office, who are just not sympathetic at all. So an independent Scotland would be a bonus for other countries as well as us.
I think independence offers us an opportunity to have a radically different foreign policy than the British state is at the minute, and I would hope that, given our history, we would be an allied to self-determination movements around the world. I think right now Catalonia, for example, is desperately in want of international friends. I think if we see what's going on in Kurdistan, and then there's movements, in Latin America and so on, where they're really fighting for their sovereignty in the face of like big global powers. And I think definitely independence can be part of a process of breaking those up and doing something differently.
I have leaflets here in support of the people who are protesting in Chile at the moment. I was out supporting some of the Chileans in Edinburgh yesterday as part of their demonstration, singing in solidarity with them. I think we have a long history in Scotland, of being oppressors and people who have really gone around spoiling the world, but B, as I suppose partly in reparation, trying to be in solidarity with people around the world. But I feel very, very strongly that we have to believe in international solidarity and support for those who, like ourselves, are trying to get rid of oppressors and who are trying to work for a just society where people are respected.
And obviously, in our own right, we're not huge and we're not going to really dictate to anybody else, but I guess if you have a nice, decent society yourself, you can maybe inspire others.
What about national self-determination in other countries? Obviously that's an issue in Scotland, but also in Catalonia, Palestine, Kurdistan. What relationship should Scotland have with those countries?
I think it's hard not to show some sort of solidarity with people that are trying to do the same thing as you're doing, obviously in more extreme circumstances than us, but it's the same kind of principle that people should have the right to self-determination.
Well, I would like to see Scotland to be a much more inclusive country and fairer, and I do believe that we can lead the world in trying to make it a better place. We could have a more positive role, but we've also got to be aware that we are a small country, and our power is probably more not in terms of defence, but in terms of influencing things.
And would you like to see Scotland getting more involved in these struggles in Catalonia Catalonia and Chile and Kurdistan, for example?
I think they should, yeah. I think we should. It's very clear that our opinion should be heard, and we should offer solidarity to such movements.
Yeah, we've seen there's a lot going on in Latin America right now. You know, what kind of orientation should Scotland have on what's going on in Chile, Ecuador, things like that? What can people in Scotland do to support those causes?
I think in the first instance they have to inform themselves about what's going on. That's the first thing. And then they have to show through their institutions some degree of support for the movements, progressive movements in these countries. That's probably one of the main things. I think in the United Nations, an independent Scotland should align itself with countries that take a more honest approach to these matters.
What should people in Scotland be doing at the moment to support those in Chile, do you think?
Well, a very simple thing is to write to all of our MPs and MSPs asking them to make sure that we are giving out a clear message from both Scotland and from the UK that we don't think that the people of Chile are at war with their president, but that they are standing up for their rights. We could really say that very, very clearly. I think that's important. Yeah.
So we heard a comment there saying that we need to be educating ourselves in this country about what is going on around the rest of the world. And I wonder if you could just start off by giving us a little bit of a rundown of what's happening in Latin America as
well,
or
in special in South America, I believe that when people say they are fighting against neoliberalism, I think they are purging the ghosts from colonialism there, because the people who are like directly involved in the actions are the indigenous, are the peasants, are the people from the most impoverished areas there. And when we talk about neoliberalism in Latin America, we talk about countries and governments who are willing to sell us out to Europeans, to the United States, and it's still a colonial power over us there, and they are rejecting that power. Mm-hmm. For the first time, when I saw the people in Chile breaking the statues of conquistadors, I was like, hell yeah! Because here in Europe, do you guys have like statues of Nazi officers? No, you don't. Why do we have to have statues of like I don't know, like some Spanish dude or some Portuguese man who are responsible for the biggest genocide in history, the indigenous in Latin America. Mm-hmm. And we are there giving them a statue, giving them praises for the horrible things they did.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think that's coming to a head now at this point in history? Why is it kind of that people are suddenly starting to
think it's because when we had in Brazil and Latin America in general, what we call here the pink tide, we tasted a little bit of a huge progress there, especially the most the people who were most in need of the progress. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not talking about you have a fancy university. No, I'm talking about like basic things like water, roads, and sewage, housing, health. And when in Brazil in special, it's important to phrase that these people who were before Lula's government, who were poor, mm-hmm. they ascended social. Mm-hmm. They have a social ascension, and they forgot they were poor. I'm middle class now. Mm-hmm. So I'm not gonna vote with my poor people, folks, and the neighborhoods and areas. No, I'm gonna vote as a middle class, because they have, in Brazil, is in special, people have a difficult, to be poor, it's a hard stigma. So I believe that those people forgot where they came from. All the if they had something now, if they went to a university, if they had housing, if they have a job, it was because of Lula efforts to make the country more egalitarian for everybody. And now what they did, when they pretend they are neoliberal, they don't know for sure what is neoliberalism. When the government approved it last week in Brazil, pension reform that was based on the Chile one, the one that people are in the streets like protesting and burning the whole country. And Brazilians were like, yeah, it's the Brazilian Bolsonaro supporters, of course, they were like, yeah, it's a conquer. We are like finally getting rid of all the privileges that Lula imposed to us. Like, it's like privilege imposed. Like you have be able to retire, it's a privilege. So I don't know.
When we talk about the pink tide, just so folk know, it was a series of movements and governments in Latin America which were, I mean, some of them were actually a lot more radical than others, but in general they were kind of to the left and were about social programs and stuff like that. I had thought that after Bolsonaro, after the attempts to overthrow the government in Venezuela, after in Ecuador, where someone who actually was inside the progressive government then turned against and went with the United States and the International Monetary Fund, I thought that the pink tide was something that was breaking down and then there was going to be a big right-wing movement. But it seems, looking at it now, and it's very different depending on the country, but you look at Ecuador, Chile, Brazil, there's a right-wing government, but there's resistance and there's dissent and stuff like that. And Ecuador, many other countries in Latin America, there's a big fight on still over those ideas about where the money should go, what democracy is, what sovereignty is, what justice looks like. So why does it have these just resources that just keep it going and going? Because this has been going on now for since the kind of early 2000s. This movement it must be drawing on huge resources from the population in terms of the determination to keep fighting.
Well, my first experience when I realized that Brazilians were like real, the resistance there was real, was when I saw over 1 million indigenous women marching towards Brasilia, the capital of Brazil. And they break into the Minister of Health to demand a proper health care for indigenous populations. They closed down all the presidential roads, like marching and chanting and painting each other and saying we are here and we are resisting and we demand our rights. When in Brazil and in Latin America in general now, I think the resistance, even though it's not, they are fighting against bloodthirsty and USA lapdogs. They are resisting with everything they have. I was talking with an indigenous activist about it, and she said, "We are here. We are resisting since the Portuguese came here. Bolsonaro does not scare us."
Yeah, so, I mean, it's fascinating because that's generations of traditions of fighting, against oppressors and foreign powers coming in and stuff like that.
But what impact is that having on Bolsonaro's kind of support and on his longevity? I mean, is it going to make an impact? Is it going to have a dent on his popularity with the kind of his support base?
I think right now my biggest fear, like even though I'm shuffled for my siblings in the rest of South America, my biggest fear is Bolsonaro is isolated. All of his world far-right buddies are being overpowered. Like he lost Salvini, he lost Netanyahu, he might lose Trump, hopefully. He might lose Trump, he lost Macri, Piñera is hanging by a thread. So my biggest fear is that Bolsonaro has been, over the past months, he has been attacking the political system.
Mm-hmm.
My biggest fear is he will declare a dictatorship. So
out of desperation because he's isolated.
because he's isolated. Yesterday, I feel even ashamed to bring this here. He posted a video like where he make it's kind of a parody of him as a lion,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like surrounded by hyenas, and one. It's horrible. And one of the hyenas, the enemies, they have like plenty, like the United Nations, and his own party, and the Supreme Court. And when I saw the Supreme Court, I was like, he is planning a coup.
Mm-hmm. Because the countries that border Brazil, my geography is not great. They include Argentina, don't they, with the left? I mean, it was again Peronism won the election there. What other countries borders Brazil?
So many.
Venezuela, exactly.
We have Bolivia.
Bolivia.
We have the Guianas.
So a lot of the countries immediately around Brazil are moving to the left, or they've stayed left. Yeah. So you think he's backed into a corner and he might lash
his
out?
foreign minister said that these countries are bringing evil spirits to Latin America. With it's horrible. But I do think that he's out of desperation. He's gonna give because he's moving towards a path that there is no way to come back. Even though the left, the political left, I say, not the popular one in the streets, but the political left, it's very sort of tamed. Like they are using legal ways like petitions and motions and carrying the proper procedure. They are doing everything they're supposed to do. They are not being radical. Bolsonaro is going more radical, even though he's not being pushed to being more radical. So today he went to Saudi Arabia, where he said that he has many things in common with the crown prince. And he made a comment when he saw a Brazilian journalist there. She's wearing a hijab. And she's like, well, you should all dress like that in Brazil because you show too much skin, something like very misogynistic of his part. And I think that Bolsonaro, when you see the movements that the people that he's courting internationally, I can imagine that we are going to live another dictatorship in Brazil, and it will be, hopefully something will happen, I don't know, a massive revolution in something like that. But the problem with the left in Brazil, in my view, is that the other countries, in Venezuela we have Maduro, but they of course they like Maduro because he evoked the memory of Chavez. But in Brazil, we have the issue with Lula, and the left is mainly focused in getting Lula out of jail. Even though during his interviews, Lula is very clear. He says, I have shelter, I have food, and I'm innocent. I want the law to say I'm an innocent man.
Yeah. So this is. I understand. I've not followed it all that closely, but I understand that they are now looking to drop some of the charges against him, but he wants to be exonerated completely.
Yes.
So there's a movement to get him.
And he refused it. They offer him like the semi-freedom thing.
But he wants a moral victory.
No, he says, no, I'm an innocent man. I want to prove they are liars. They made a coup against me. They used it of illegal. They made up things. So I want them to say in my face, you are innocent man. So he will stay there. Looking
at the situation as a whole, though. I mean, you look at the streets of Chile the other day. There were 1 million people out in the streets. I mean, you were saying just before we started, you think that we might be moving beyond the pink tide phase of the movement.
Yes, I don't think we are going towards a pink tide 2.0. I think we are finally going towards something that might be a modern version of the Patria Grande from Simón Bolívar. Even in countries where they have the most turbulent political history, like Colombia, the FARC, is now a political party, and they elected a mayor in Turbaco. It's a huge city there, and they were considered the ugly duck of the election. And even though they have over 100 former combatants, former guerrilleros, many were elected. Which is huge, even with all the stigma with the FARC's, the history and everything, they got elected.
So do you think the Latin American movement can move towards like a more unified situation?
Yes, and I'm seeing when I'm kind of studying the patterns of the speeches of Evo Morales, Alberto Fernandes now in Argentina, and Nicolas Maduro. They are always using especially on social media, hashtag Patria Grande. They all like talking about, and they are all united. They are all saying the first thing Fernandes said after he was announced the new president of Argentina was like making the Lula livre. They will all also be united towards the Lula cause, and Bolsonaro is terrified of Lula because Lula is a force to be reckoned.
And just lastly, I suppose, because this stuff is never in our media, but when it is, it's never discussed that the entire political situation in Latin America is overdetermined by the fact that it's the US politicians used to refer to it as our back garden.
They still do.
Is there anger in Latin America towards the United States?
Yes, yes. And the funniest thing is the people in Latin America who support the so-called neoliberal political side, they are not neoliberal, they are militarized, new kind of, they are fascist 2.0 from the old day, from the remains of the dictatorships we had during the 60s. And I think that when they go to the manifestations and things like that, they carry a U.S. flag, a Israel flag. Sometimes the Union Jack I saw as well. Yeah. So it's interesting to see that how much they care about being, especially in Brazil, especially being friends with the United States.
And we've seen people in the streets in Glasgow recently in support of what's going on in Chile. We've seen some nice messages from the people involved in the Paz Iran documentary and protests, sort of offering their support and solidarity. But what else can people do here in Scotland to kind of show solidarity with the movements that are going on there?
I think the best thing people here can actually do is to start to hold accountable the companies, the British corporations that are destroying Latin America. Like recently in Chile, they have a huge problem with minings there, with the exploration within indigenous lands. And we had recently one of a Chilean activist here. He was talking about how much damage BHP has done it there, and also in other countries as well. So I think there's actually something that you can do here. That is, you can start to making pressure over these companies, because here in the global north, you actually kind of have more laws, environmental protection laws, worker rights laws, and things like that. But in South America, the laws we had, for example, in Brazil, the laws we had in protection, all the things that we had to fight a lot to have, it were taken from us by Bolsonaro now. A few years ago, I heard from a trustworthy source that especially the British companies are more excited to invest in Brazil now because it's easier for a foreigner invest there. When Lula was the president, he made some it's not a blockage, but I would say he put some restrictions, like we have to protect ourselves first, make a strong internal market. And now Bolsonaro said, no, we don't care about the companies here. We want the foreigner companies coming here. So he is giving lots of tax breaks and things of this sort to foreign corporations. So I think the best way people here can do is, let's start held BHP accountable. BHP was responsible for a huge mining accident in Chile. They were responsible for the Mariana tragedy in Brazil. BP is buying lots of the pre-sal in Brazil, the deep sea oil. They are buying sea quadrants. They have been investing since Dilma was removed from power. What a coincidence. They are investing millions of pounds there. They have a massive project of extraction of oil in Brazil, including in areas that are very problematic because they are marine sanctuaries and things of this sort. There are several companies here that are actually being helped by the UK government to make business there, that we can, I don't know, that now I think it would be a good time to write to your MP, to MSP, and say, why are we allowing these things to happen? Because as I said, you can't fight against global warming, environmental damage only here, only in the global north, only in Europe. It's a global issue.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming in and speaking to us, Nathalia. And yes, if you have any comments, feedback or thoughts on what we've been talking about, do let us know, and we'll see you next time.